Alrighty, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining eGroup's summer webinar series, where today we will be discussing future-proofing hybrid cloud with Citrix SD-WAN. We're excited to be joined today by eGroup's Director of Data Center Architecture, Mike Dent. A few fun facts about Mike. In addition to over 20 years of IT experience, Mike is a man of many hobbies. He's an avid traveler, a CrossFit trainer, and a blogger. Before we get started today, if you do have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to ask them in the chat box. We will be answering any and all questions at the end of the webinar. So without further ado, take it away, Mike.
Hear me all right? I was having some audio issues.
Yes.
All right, excellent. Well, good morning, everybody. So thanks for the intro, Carly. Today we're going to talk about really the future proofing of hybrid cloud, right? Hybrid cloud, we're starting to see it become more and more kind of prevalent in organizations. And really, it's the point of the hybrid cloud is to be able to, provide application agility, mobility for not just applications, but users and the entire organization. So when we look at what we need to do with hybrid cloud, it used to just be, we'd stand up a couple data circuits here and there, and that was sufficient for what the organization needed. Now that we're starting to go to multiple destinations, multiple environments, it really becomes a problematic issue for how we manage data, how we manage user access and security. So as we look at what opportunities we've got in the marketplace today, SD-WAN is starting to provide a much more granular way of controlling access, of aggregating bandwidth, and providing the organization a much better experience for users. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the slide deck here. A little bit about eGroup. We were founded in 1999. 2 decades of delivering successful customer outcomes, right? So this is across a variety of different customer base, different silos, and different infrastructures, right? So we have 3 core competencies: the data center infrastructure, which is going to be your traditional 4-wall data center with storage, compute, networking, security, and everything that goes with that. Cloud services around, really anything kind of specifically related to the Microsoft cloud and or anything in that cloud area. So, infrastructure as a service, just in general service functionality in the cloud. And then finally, our managed services, which is our on-site support or just kind of general managed monthly service opportunities that we have. We are a privately owned debt-free company with national and international solutions delivery experience. We currently support customers, I believe it's in approaching about 30 states today, and some international customers. Again, as I touched on earlier, we cross over multiple silos. So, right, legal, higher ed, manufacturing. We don't specifically focus in any general area, but we like to kind of keep it broad, and from an experience perspective, it lets us see multiple different environments to be able to help customers with solutions. Not going to go through all these. Some recent recognition around for eGroup. We pride ourselves in providing to customers solutions that make sense, that are timely, and that are going to benefit the organization. Not just a solution that is cool because the technology is cool, but something that the immediate value, speed and simplicity, speed and certainty, anything that we can do to help provide that customer a greater experience is what we're looking to do. So let's go ahead and jump on in, right? So work is no longer a place. It used to be that everybody would show up, from 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 to the office, to the cube on Monday through Friday, and that's where everything was. Now we're moving towards a much different environment, right? Where work is distributed, whether that's our people, offices, businesses, partners, and where that data resides, right, is different. On-premise, cloud, SaaS, data moves. Users move and applications move as well, right? So from different variety of devices, right? From where that user can connect to, we don't need to know whether they're in that office all the time, as long as they have the ability to work. That's really what we're looking for. So work is really no longer a 4-walled place that we have to worry about. It's increasingly dynamic. and people want to be as adaptable as they can be. So some digital transformation impacts. Digital transformation is a topic that a lot of organizations are starting to look at, right? So when we look at kind of that top imperative, it's employee experience, right? We want customers and employees expect high performance wherever they are. They expect to be able to do their business and do their work from anywhere. Cloud proliferation, right? So we look at that 90% of companies using public cloud to some extent, and 67% of workloads will be in the cloud by 2020. When we look at that public cloud and the SaaS apps, really, like Microsoft Office 365 is really that one that started to drive the cloud adoption, right? Let's push towards that environment of being able to simplify our environment by offloading a lot of work that we can kind of take into account for somebody else. Hybrid multi-cloud architecture, right? 62% of public cloud adopters using 2+ unique cloud environments, right? So we're dispersing our workloads. We're going to multiple clouds, right? So if you're a Microsoft customer, Azure makes a lot of sense. If you're a heavy web developer, maybe AWS or GCP with Google makes more sense because there's more knobs and buttons you can push for services, right? But that doesn't mean you have to lock into one of those clouds. You can use multiples. The evolution of applications, traditional application migration to modern app architectures. We're seeing this everywhere, right? Docker, Kubernetes, everything that's a container. Applications are moving. The traditional 3-tier application of a database server, a web server, an application server, those are starting to go away. We're starting to see these cloud hybrid applications where it stretches both on-premise and in the cloud. So a lot more application traffic that's going east to west, right? And finally, the expanded complexity to reduce the attack surfaces and exposure to risk. Look at that, average cost of a breach is around $3.6 million. And this was from a stat from 2018, but we can still see that the understanding that a breach is serious and costly for organizations. So as application workloads slowly move to the cloud, that does result in that hybrid experience. IT has to be able to accommodate for a hybrid environment these days, right? The shift towards SaaS further decreases intranet load. So if we look at like SharePoint Online or Salesforce or Workday, we start to see this movement that does not require us to have a lot of intranet presence. So, it used to be, 10, 15 years ago, the intranet was the thing. You had to have an intranet for your employees. Now it's such a dispersed workload that the services that the intranet used to provide are broken up into, let's call it microservices, right? They exist elsewhere and through multiple functions. Hybrid and multi-cloud approach makes the transition pragmatic and paced. We can now segment our migrations. We don't have to do a rip and replace or a big bang movement. We can now slowly move to what makes sense for the business. And finally, a shift in emphasis from connectivity requires visibility, right? It requires IT management regardless of the resource location. It still is 4 walls somewhere. Our data exists somewhere. We still have to take serious the security and performance of all of our data, where it lives, how it's accessed, and who can access it, right? So IT doesn't get off the hook just because we start to move to a hybrid approach. We start to need to focus on where our data lives and how to control that access even more. So why the hybrid cloud, right? Multi-cloud avoids vendor lock-in, right? So I've got the ability to look at multiple cloud environments, look at different ways to put my data or location to put my data, and the ability to utilize kind of economies of scale of different vendors. Hybrid provides choice, right? I can now move to some extent between the public clouds and on-premise pretty simply, easily, and at a speed that we've not been able to do previously. Automation for agility. I don't need to know which cloud I'm provisioning my resources in anymore. I can just automate, spin up, spin down, point to the correct cloud that I want. And the orchestration kind of comes with that automation, right? Being able to, again, deploy to clouds that I don't need to know necessarily where all my functions running. I can split clouds. I can be on-premise. I can have it in a variety of locations. But the orchestration platforms that we have to be able to handle that decision-making and for the user from a simplicity perspective. And then be able to get the analytics for the decision-making. We need to be able to understand what our latency looks like, what our performance for the user, and what the experience is going to look like. So right now, 62% are in a public cloud to some extent, and 74% are in a hybrid cloud. So if you think about your Office 365 migration potentially, you probably started with more of a hybrid Exchange environment where you still had a lot of on-prem components for Exchange and some was in Office 365, and you straddled those lines, and that would be that hybrid cloud approach, right? So everybody pretty much is looking to this method as some way to augment the business and to kind of get out of the traditional IT operations and simplify the organization. So technology shifts, right? This is what we've always been. We had that centralized cloud architecture, right? Everything was kind of in one. Think of your data center. You went from maybe multiple data centers to pulled back into a single data center, or different varieties of that. Or when you went to the cloud, you kind of jumped all in with one. But really now what we're looking at is a decentralized cloud, microservices. Things live in different places, right? So again, like I touched on earlier, I might have some components of an application or a solution that lives in multiple cloud vendors. I don't need to know, again, where I'm always going to be focusing my cloud, but I need to know that network access, user access, and security is still of a critical importance and a way to be able to handle that reliable access to my applications and services. So the key important fact here is that experience, that user experience. So how do we empower users and how do we empower the organization to still run an optimal kind of performance from an access and data perspective, but being able to simplify our approach through the use of IT and through the use of different experiences for the user from multiple clouds. So our goal is to deliver that world-class experience to users anywhere. And with Citrix's SD-WAN product, we get some of these capabilities. We can give employees secure, reliable access to the content they need from anywhere, right? From any device. Doesn't matter where they are or who they are. This includes both our own internal users or customers or even our partners, right? The Citrix networking portfolio really provides a centralized management platform that allows you to cross over each of these clouds easily and reliable and high performance and not have to worry about that user access. So when we look at kind of what our goal here is we have to be able to have kind of a visibility into what our internet traffic is going to look like, right? With multiple services being optimized elsewhere or held elsewhere for us, I have to be able to know what my best traffic path is, right? So historically, we might have had an MPLS service to connect all our branches together with an internet circuit and maybe a backup LTE or satellite. But we didn't have great visibility into how each of those was actively operating at a given time and be able to simply redirect traffic over the better or more optimized route, right? So we had a blind spot. So we could not always tell the data to, if you're going to Azure, I want you to take this circuit. But if you're going to a remote branch or my data center, I want you to go down this path. So it was difficult to be able to provide reliability and that high performance for users when we didn't really have a great amount of visibility into each of our connection paths. So the performance experience, right? So with Citrix SD-WAN, we can now look at redirecting traffic and steer application traffic based on different business rules, right? It might be traffic that needs to go direct to the internet for general web traffic, or traffic that needs to be tunneled to our data center, or just general traffic that needs to go to, say, Salesforce or Office 365, right? We don't have to backhaul traffic anymore. We can now optimize our traffic path, eliminating some of the overhead that we've always had or tried to have to be able to secure our infrastructures. So the other thing that Citrix SD-WAN product the portfolio gives us is a high performance access to Office 365 from anywhere. So whether I'm coming from my branch, campus, different locations, I now have the ability to direct users to the closest front door service to their location. Meaning, if I'm coming in from the West Coast, maybe traffic that crosses over from the West Coast to the East Coast just to get to Office 365 is not going to be the best user experience for my end users or my customers. Now I can direct them potentially to the closest Office 365 front door, which might be in California or Washington. I've got the ability to now direct my traffic across links that I know are going to provide the user the best experience. So when we look at the Citrix SD-WAN portfolio for cloud and SaaS migrations, we really have multiple facets, right? So no matter where you are in that cloud journey, the SD-WAN products and portfolios really provide you that easy connection for your applications, whether it's the internet, cloud, back to the data center, or alternate branches, right? So maybe it's a branch-to-branch communication we're worried about. Being able to control the path that these take and eliminate some of these more costly circuits that we have had to deal with. You know, MPLS has been great for years, but it's costly and slow these days. But what if we can start to take some standard, direct internet circuits and start to really optimize our user experience by bundling multiples together, funneling traffic over certain paths and different ways to get to our resources. So let's look a little bit at the Citrix SD-WAN architecture. So the SD-WAN, creates a software-defined application delivery network. And what that really means is, as we start to stand up the Citrix SD-WAN product line, we start to create these overlay networks that kind of mask what our physical network looks like, but allows us to really optimize that network fabric so we can start to aggregate and deliver services from different data centers or different clouds or different branches, but simplified from the end user. We take a lot of our routing requirements, we take a lot of our overhead that we've had to put in to optimize our network. A lot of that goes away with SD-WAN. Now we're just provisioning our physical network and using the SD-WAN management capabilities direct our traffic to where we need to go. So we look at the SD-WAN overview, right? Initially, we've got application awareness, and this is a key factor when we consider the Citrix SD-WAN portfolio of what we can actually get from a usability perspective, right? So the the SD-WAN portfolio is constantly reviewing and looking at known protocols and port numbers. So we're able to kind of filter down into the app classifications. We're able to see what the payload of the application looks like, and then the security certificates. Be able to understand what traffic is trying to go where. We also have the ability to do DNS matching and known IP address. This is stuff we can set up internally to understand what our solution looks like. And also, if we're going out to SaaS providers, be able to query the APIs of those SaaS providers to understand what the URLs paths that these SaaS providers have and direct users specifically to the best location and over the best path. So when we look at kind of that application awareness with Citrix SD-WAN, we get a very granular control plane around understanding what our applications can do. And Citrix likes to say upwards of 4,000 applications have been identified to be able to really optimize. So you can see on this screen, we can optimize traffic and understand traffic from the Microsoft Office suite, whether that's Word, Excel, PowerPoint from an application perspective. But I can always also look at, say, Facebook. Am I looking at my news feed, or am I looking at media, or am I looking at Messenger, right? So we know about the known layer 2 through layer 4 protocols. We know about DNS entries or the DNS records for these services, and we can optimize the path that this traffic is going to take. Without this, what we see potentially is just, hey, there's some Office 365 and there's some Facebook. We can't optimize certain facets of each of these components. It's just kind of like, here's what you've got, here's how you get to Office 365, and we're done. But with Citrix SD-WAN, we've got the ability to very granularly control and understand what traffic is going where, what applications are trying to traverse our links, and optimize those applications, whether it's real-time, interactive, or even just background traffic. So what others you're going to see is that course identification, course handling. We don't really get granular with it. We don't understand what the user application is doing or what the actual traffic is trying to do. But with Citrix SD-WAN, again, we've got 4,500 plus applications, components that are understood and identified. So as these grow and this continues to grow, we can continue to optimize our environment. So again, looking at that overview, let's go into the path control and see how we can handle and optimize and make the solution better for our end users with path control. So if you think about what we've always been able to do, right? You could always have that MPLS circuit and an internet circuit, and based on routing controls, we could say, all right, this, if you're trying to go to this destination, then you need to go over the MPLS. If it's just kind of a default traffic where it's internet, you're going to go out our standard internet connection. And then if maybe we had a backup LTE or satellite connection on the hardware. Now we've got the ability to do is create a virtual logical path that's made up of each of these links. So we can bond together an MPLS circuit, an internet circuit, an LTE backup, or multiples. And this is from both our branch to other branches, to the data center, and to the clouds. I can now start to aggregate these connections together and create a single virtual path that they're all together, they're all used. So we create a software-defined overlay with the understanding of line conditions, meaning I'm always constantly checking the links. So the SD-WAN solution is checking every packet that passes through the network. We understand the latency, loss, and congestion and jitter of every possible path. When we're talking about voice over IP, jitter and latency become huge. So we now have an intelligence platform that is used for making these network decisions, unlike other areas where maybe, we run traffic over the MPLS until we started having performance issues, and then we either had to increase MPLS or look at routing traffic a different way. Now I can dynamically move my traffic to the best path as needed. So if I have, if I've got a specific application that I want to run over MPLS, voice over IP, for example, or something else that's heavily trafficked, but I need consistent low latency, maybe I direct that over my MPLS link. But other traffic I shoot over the internet link back to my data center. So based on the policies that we set, I can also prioritize based on the application. So if I want to prioritize my voice over IP, or if I want to prioritize my core ERP that's hosted in my data center or an Oracle database, I can start to provision that and identify those applications and push them over the link that I find best for them. And this is dynamically done or statically done. So I've got the ability to control that low loss or low latency path for applications that need it based on the criteria that I've set. The other thing I can do is ensure critical applications have bandwidth. I can set that specific applications coming from my branch back to my data center are prioritized. This is similar to QoS, but from a QoS perspective, we're filtering based on certain types of data or packets of data or QoS or EF qualifications that I've got. With SD-WAN, I've got the ability to prioritize the application based on the traffic that I understand and know. So I can ensure that I've got bidirectional QoS set up for my applications over the links that I have specified to my branches, my data center, and my clouds. So it's also intelligently using rated links, right? So rated links are going to be our LTE and satellite that are somewhat limited on the number of what speeds they have. So if I want to ensure that on my LTE satellite, I only get a certain amount of usage a month, I can control how much traffic is going to pass over that, when it's used, and how long it's going to be used for. So we can actually, we can actually control the use of those rated links, right? If I want all my traffic to go over MPLS and internet, but maybe I've got something that I need to go over my LTE or satellite links, I can control that, but also control how much is actually used to my different resource locations. Standby links. This is something that we've been able to have, and to some extent, in the traditional world, where I've got my internet circuits and my internet circuit, and then maybe a LTE or a satellite as a failover or a backup. But now what I can do is start to identify business rules that say, here's the criteria of what links I will use and what thresholds they are used, but set up a standby link. So an LTE or a satellite, these are only going to be used when certain thresholds are hit, or active passive links. So when I need to understand that my internet goes down, but I don't want to push everything over my MPLS, I now redirect my internet traffic to LTE. I can now set active and standby links on certain rules when criteria is met, or different prioritized links. I now know what my capabilities are and when to filter traffic over to an alternate direction. So we've got this intelligent breakout, right? So from the branch, I can steer the application based on business rules, right? So my branch is on my left side here. So if I'm just going, if I know it's a SaaS application, I can direct that over. Maybe it's over my standard internet circuit where I'm just going to filter it direct out to the internet for, say, Salesforce or Office 365. If I need to go through some sort of secure web gateway, right? So Zscaler or ForcePoint or Symantec or one of the others, I can direct my traffic specifically to that for secure traffic. And if it's my data center traffic, I can now branch, from the branch, I can direct that traffic directly to where I need it to go back to my data center. So again, a lot of this comes down to eliminating the need to backhaul all traffic through the data center for prioritization or filtering and then out to the internet or out to some other secure web gateway service. I've now got the ability from my branches or from my remote locations to go direct where I need them to go without having to be backhauled. More efficient use of the WAN, right, when it comes down to it. SD-WAN routing. So again, another piece of this puzzle is simplifying our routing when it's in overlay mode. So we don't need to understand what networks live where or how traffic needs to go back and forth from my branches to my data centers and from my branches to the cloud to some extent. I've now got the ability to easily implement a more dynamic routing protocol in the case that I don't need to do LAN subnet configurations at each of my locations. It's much more simplified in that it will actually configure, through OSPF or BGP from a dynamic routing perspective, the additional routes that it needs to go. So I can learn dynamically the way I want my traffic to float and be filtered through, but without needing to do a lot of this on the physical network, right? So we can, allows us to kind of operate in two different modes. One is the overlay mode, where it creates a virtual network over the actual routed network. There would still be a router on the edge in that case, right? So we'd have the SD-WAN appliances behind, say, a Cisco router or a firewall or some device on the edge. So there's still going to be that case, right? And that's going to allow us to still provide capabilities from the physical network for traffic that does not need to float through our SD-WAN environment, but still allows us to have standard network control over the rest of our network. So the firewall, one of the nice things that the SD-WAN functionality from Citrix includes is also a firewall. So it includes a stateful firewall for your locations, right? So for your remote branches, we can start to simplify how we filter and what we allow in and out of our environments. So it gives a comprehensive firewall from an IP to application layer, right? It does fully featured for support for dynamic and static net, and allows us to have that firewall rules even for encrypted traffic. Because we are application intelligent and we understand what is floating through the SD-WAN devices, we can start to look at firewall rules that are filtered specifically around HTTPS or SSL traffic. We can define zones to enforce different policies for different users. And this is a key point, right? It's kind of hard to some extent today to employ firewall rules directed specifically at users, but we can do applications fairly easily, right? We know the application ports, we know the traffic there, but from a user perspective, how easy has it been to block the accounting department, not by IP range, but by the users themselves, right? So from where they're going or what they're accessing. This is both inbound and outbound, right? So we've got the ability to enforce different policies at the user level to control what they can't see, where they can and can't go. And through the SD-WAN center, it's a single point of management across all of our networks. And we'll see some more details around that later. But it easily allows us to implement firewall rules across all of our sites, right? So a common single platform that allows us to push firewall rules out to each of our sites, wherever that may be. And this would be a branch, a campus, a clinic, or even to some extent the cloud. So from a Microsoft Azure or Amazon or even GCP, to control what firewall rules exist at the cloud level for application access and user access. So WAN optimization, it's kind of that fourth piece to the SD-WAN portfolio. And what it allows us to do is really optimize the traffic. And this has been around for a while. This is, Citrix with the WAN optimization appliances that they've had. They've been folded into the SD-WAN portfolio. And really, there's two different editions. One is going to be our WAN op edition, which is, as you can see on the screen here, best for locations that only have one link. It's going to be that traditional WAN optimization, trying to compress compress what data it can, reduce congestion, simplify that link. So the WAN op edition is great for when we only have one link, but when we have multiple links, so a branch that's going to have one or two paths, we've now got the ability to have the premium edition where it's going to optimize the path. So both of our primary and secondary links are considered a single path from the SD-WAN perspective, and it's going to optimize traffic that goes over both of those. So through the WAN optimization, we can also accelerate Microsoft apps. So when we look at this, it's great for end-to-end security. It alleviates a lot of our latency, right? So it starts to help us with bandwidth optimization. So placing a Citrix SD-WAN appliance, near our hosting location, and hosting location in this case might be, let's say we've got, either Office 365 or we're still doing some on-prem to some extent, can dramatically improve the Office 365 and Office performance and experience from the end user. That might result in high latency conditions because of the circuits at our remote facilities, right? It's Office 365 is increasingly common for everybody, but for offices that aren't located near kind of a quick entryway to Office 365 or have high latency in general, it can be a frustrating deployment. It can be a frustrating experience for users. So using the SD-WAN optimization really can help reduce bandwidth needs and provides that flexible deployment based on the number of circuits that exist at each location. All right, so again, flexibility for the Microsoft solution. So finally, in our overview puzzle here, we've got the unified policies and management. And really what we're looking at here is this is kind of table stakes for a lot of these SD-WAN deployments, is as we start to expand our environment out, we start to look at needing that single pane of glass, regardless of where it's from. So with the SD-WAN center, I can control my branch, data center, and cloud environments all from a single perspective, right? So that's the path control, routing, firewall, WAN optimization, and application awareness, all from that same user interface. And I can work regardless of what those branches have from a circuit perspective, whether it's MPLS, whether it is satellite internet, just direct internet connections, 4G, or insert kind of technology here, 5G that's coming. This is across the branches, the data centers, the cloud. I have full control over all of these environments to define my policies centrally and then push across each of these environments. No branch or device configure, even login is required, right? So with SD-WAN Center, we have a discovery path that when these SD-WAN appliances come online, we enter in some information to let them be discovered by the SD-WAN Center, and that provides our management and discovery without having to do any pre-configuration on the device, right? So it eliminates the need to log in node by node for implementing various configuration changes or even software updates, right? So when I need to do a software update for my SD-WAN devices, I now have a simplified manner to push out patches or configurations to each of my nodes. SD-WAN, specific topic here for SD-WAN for Office 365. So utilizing the Citrix SD-WAN portfolio to really help optimize Office 365 and Azure connectivity from our organization, from our branches, and for our end users, right? So when we look at kind of fast onboarding, we want, anytime we're doing some sort of kind of onboarding to the cloud, we want it to be fast, efficient, and configured correctly the first time. So through the SD-WAN orchestrator, we've got the ability from a branch perspective to configure connectivity and VPNs to each app onboarded into Azure, right? So as we start to move things into Azure from each of our branches or our locations, I now have the ability to control direct access to Azure from a VPN perspective or from a connectivity perspective for end users, again, without having to back all my traffic to the data center to go up to Azure or to the cloud. As I move apps to Azure, the other component to this is Azure's virtual WAN. So the Azure virtual WAN is that next kind of control plane for Azure to allow access to applications and resources that live in Azure. And the nice thing about the virtual WAN control is that it will actually automatically configure our SD-WAN devices for network access to Azure optimally. So without having to go, today, historically, when we stand up a VPN, we take our VPN appliance on-prem, we do some configuration in Azure from a VPN perspective. We've got to map out what subnets are existing on both sides. With Azure Virtual WAN, it will actually configure those SD-WAN devices automatically for us for access into that Azure network. So here's the networks that you can access. That VPN is automatically configured with the Azure Virtual WAN configuration against the SD-WAN. So it simplifies what we need to do. Again, kind of back to that orchestrator and the management control plane, that single entity of being able to push policies and configurations out. Azure Virtual WAN allows you to do that with the Citrix SD-WAN portfolio directly on the devices, rather than having to have human intervention, which we all know when we're setting up VPNs can be a problematic or frustrating experience. So again, Microsoft and Citrix with SD-WAN deliver that great Office 365 experience, right? So depending on where I'm at, Office 365 front door integration for app classification. So I'm able to now direct my branch users, depending on where they're trying to go or what resources they're trying to access, to the closest entry, to that closest front door for the users, right? So how do I quickly and optimally get them to the resources they need from an edge perspective, from a data center perspective, or for any of my branches, right? This optimizes that latency and the internet traversal. So again, key point coming back to it is eliminating the need to always consistently backhaul our traffic back to the data center for egress out to either the internet or to a cloud capability, right? So having that quick access directly from the branches, because we've now got firewall capabilities, because we've got the routing capabilities and security capabilities with the SD-WAN appliances in our branches, it eliminates that need to traverse those circuits back to the data center just to be able to get out to the internet or out to a cloud perspective. So again, Microsoft and Citrix have done a great job with SD-WAN of being able to simply integrate into that Office 365 experience and Azure experience for the end users to be optimized regardless of their location, right? So regardless of where that branch is, I can now tune my end users' experience and performance to get to the resources they need based on the traffic that we can understand and see. So kind of wrapping up in some summary. So with the Citrix SD-WAN, hopefully you've seen where it can really start to optimize your environment, really simplify your environment, through the aggregation of multiple links, right? So the title of this session was really future-proofing your hybrid cloud, right? And so the point of SD-WAN is really a couple different ways here, right? So our three kind of components here that really why SD-WAN is required for that cloud transformation. Provides that direct internet access from our branches and from our locations, right? So now it allows us to simplify that access out from each of our locations through a firewall protection, or optional, directing traffic to that secure web gateway like Zscaler. But now I can take my branches and really get them out to the internet as fast as I can without having to, backhaul or, traditional backhaul environments. If the circuit to the data center goes out, it affects each of our branches now, right? It affects the entire organization. But now I've got the ability to securely and optimally drive traffic directly to the internet from my branches with SD-WAN, the portfolio in place. SaaS applications, so your Salesforce, your Workday, your Office 365, now we can start to identify the SaaS applications with an integrated database. So we understand what users are going to. So we can block SaaS applications for all or some subsets of users. So maybe this branch location they don't need access to Salesforce or some other SaaS application we've got. We can now start to block applications or filter what policies are available for end users to access. Same thing with SaaS applications. We can still direct traffic to the data center or secure web gateway based on user and application. So if I have a high security environment, either public safety or hospitals where I need to ensure that traffic is directed back to my data center for filtering or going through some sort of secure web gateway, I can now do that based on the user and application. So maybe folks in a hospital nurses that need to check patient records that in a SaaS application, I can direct them through a secure web gateway prior to them actually connecting outbound. So we've got the functionality and feature sets to be able to simply identify users and applications and get them to the location they need based on the traffic patterns that we as an organization have deemed are important for us. And finally, really, as we look at the SaaS gateways that allow you to optimally jump into the SaaS arenas, right? So Citrix is providing gateways that get you, basically it's similar to that front door exposure for Office 365, quick gateways that allow you to get kind of prioritized and reliable and optimal access to the Salesforces, the Workdays, and the other SaaS applications. Because it's using an integrated database, we can also, like I said, we can also control what users can access and what users can't. And it really ties back in to the Citrix workplace notion that they're using from that simplified end user kind of portal that allows us to quickly identify, here's the applications you have access to that's tied into SD-WAN or tied into other security rules, and being able to offer users that experience that makes sense for them. And finally, getting over to our cloud, right? AWS, Azure, really where we see this key is providing reliable connections to AWS, Azure directly from the branch or the data center, right? We don't have to always provision it out from the data center. We can now start to put our SD-WAN appliances in those clouds to optimally direct traffic to those resources, creating that data center-like experience, right? Creating that quick on-ramp, creating that quick access to those resources from an end-user experience perspective, and gain visibility and connections to the cloud, right? So today, when we do a standard VPN connection with Microsoft, we don't have a ton of visibility into our Azure VPN connections other than what's on our on-prem side that we can gather. So now with the Cloud VPX, the Cloud SD-WAN appliance, we now have control and visibility into both sides of the environment. With Azure Virtual WAN, we've got the ability to have those devices quickly configured for connection and be able to see latency, loss, path taken, the path taken to those resources now. So again, really it's required for that cloud transformation, for that digital transformation that the organization is looking to make. It really helps us simplify and drive end user experience and access to the resources we need them to have. And another optional kind of component that Citrix provides with the SD-WAN portfolio is the ability to use Equinix for a multi-cloud connection. So if we're going into multiple public clouds, we can basically go through Equinix and then have them direct to the closest cloud provider as needed, right? So it's just another optional component to the cloud perspective that we've got for allowing us to really give that end user the experience that they need. So again, key points again back to the SD-WAN are, I'm gonna jump back here real quick. That internet access, being able to quickly, safely, and securely get internet access from those branches and stop the use of the backhauled internet to always be controlling traffic, push that control out to the edge branch devices. Our access to our SaaS applications, being able to get users directly to where they need to go quickly and securely for those SaaS applications. And then finally, access into the cloud from that data center-like experience, that data, it's making sure that the user experience, it's just like the application lives on-prem right next to the user, and being able to direct that traffic over the best link possible for them. So I think I jumped right through that. So questions that we might have out there?
Mike, we did have a couple of questions come through. The first one is an SD-WAN appliance required in every location for optimum performance?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we look at the infrastructure that SD-WAN provides is, when we look at kind of doing a full SD-WAN scope, it really is an SD-WAN appliance needs to be provisioned at each location that we want traffic to be both routed out from, or traffic that we want to manage, and traffic where it's destined to. So as with the the one case that is not, so if let me step back here. If I'm trying to do a fully meshed kind of SD-WAN environment for my organization, each of my branches would need some level of SD-WAN appliance, whether that's a physical appliance or a virtual appliance. My data center would need one to kind of be that core component for my SD-WAN environment. But where it starts to get a little muddy is the cloud, right? So with Azure Virtual WAN, for example, since it can configure an SD-WAN device at a branch level for optimal connections, really the short answer, or a very long-winded answer, I guess, is from a branch to branch or branch to data center, we want to have an SD-WAN appliance in each of those locations. But as traffic traverses up to the cloud, no, because Azure Virtual WAN can, again, configure those on-prem SD-WAN appliances for us. We don't need to necessarily have an SD-WAN appliance in the cloud. However, we do lose the visibility for an optimization at the cloud level for that traffic. So in a perfect world, we've got an SD-WAN appliance in each, or SD-WAN appliance, or whether it's virtual or physical, in each location, including the cloud environments.
All right, and then we had one other question come in. Can you apply firewall rules to different applications and traffic?
Yeah, so we touched on that. Let me see if I can jump back to one of the previous slides here for the firewall. This one here. Yes, so we can actually control, from an application perspective, since we are application aware, we can control the application firewall. So we can push firewall rules out that map to both users and applications, right? So I can push firewall rules that say allow this location can access my on-prem data center resource while this location can't, and really be able to organize our firewall rules that way. So that's from a user or location perspective. I can also say these users from this location can access this application. These users from this location cannot access this application. So you get very granular both from the application perspective and from the user perspective.
All right, thanks, Mike, for all the great information. If anyone has any additional questions following today's webinar, please reach out to us via egroup-us.com. Thank you to everyone in attendance for taking time out of your day to tune in, and have a great week, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Hope you have a great day.